Staff and the general public. Welcome to our public meeting for December 21st, 2020. If I could have somebody move to open the public meeting, please. Moved by Lyle, second by Councillor Jaworski. All in favor? Motion's carried. Thank you. Any additions to the agenda?
No, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you. That's seeing none. Kind of approve of the agenda for December 21st. Moved by Councillor Lang, second by Deputy Mayor Warden. All in favor? Motion's carried. Any declaration of pecuniary interest? Not seeing none. We'll move into presentation and delegations. The first one, apologize if I'm not pronouncing it correctly. Bertoldi, is that correct?
That is correct.
Bertoldi zoning amendment. Thank you. Mrs. Haley.
So I will get started with the formal requirements. Okay. Sorry about that. Okay, so welcome everyone to our public meeting this evening. For members of the public that are participating by Zoom or by phone, you will be permitted to speak to the respective application following my presentation. And prior to speaking, please state your name and address for the record. To make a comment, if you're using Zoom, you can use the raise hand function and the chair will call on you. However, if you've registered to participate in the meeting by phone to speak to a particular application, you will be asked if you would like to comment on the application after the applicable presentation. So we have 3 public meetings this evening, but before we get started, I do have to read the required wording under the Ontario Planning Act. So this is a hearing under Section 34 of the Ontario Planning Act. Any person may attend this hearing and or make written or verbal representation either in support of or in opposition to the proposed zoning amendment. If a person or public body does not make oral or written submissions at this hearing before the zoning amendment is decided upon, the person or public body is not entitled to appeal the decision of the Council of the Township of South Glengarry to the Local Planning Appeal Tribunal, also known as LPAT. If a person or public body does not make oral submissions at a hearing or make written submissions to the Township of South Glengarry before the zoning amendment is decided upon, the person or public body may not be added as a party to the hearing of an appeal before the LPAT unless, in the opinion of the tribunal, there are reasonable grounds to do so. So as you mentioned, our first public meeting this evening is called the Bertoldi Zoning Amendment. This property is located at part of Lot 17, Concession 9, being parts 2 and 5 on Reference Plan 14R6139 in the geographic township of Lancaster, now in South Glengarry. This is a key map of where the property is located. You can see this is Concession 10, so the very north end of our township, and this is Third Line Road. And here's an aerial image of the property. You can see the property is highlighted in blue, and it's primarily a fully treed parcel of property. So the subject property is approximately 93 acres in size. It is primarily forested and contains a cabin. A cabin was built there without approvals many years ago, and it's unserviced. And recently, the current property owner relocated the cabin to be closer to the road, which resulted in public and administration becoming aware of the structure. The cabin is approximately 10 feet by 20 feet in size. Our zoning bylaw permits cabins, but only as a temporary use, as the primary use for properties located in the agricultural zone are for residential or agricultural purposes. Therefore, the property owner was offered different processes in order to seek permission to allow the cabins to remain. It's not that we don't want cabins, but you don't generally create any taxation from cabins or assessment from cabins. So again, that's why the purpose of your property is really for farming or for a residence to be on it. So the property owner chose to apply for a zoning amendment to request permission to rezone the subject property from agriculture to agriculture exception 27 to permit a cabin as a primary and a permanent use. They were not interested in the temporary use that would give them permission to have it for 3 years. So I now have some photos of the property. So you can see a new entrance was created, the new gate, and this is the location of the cabin. And this is really what was brought to our attention, both to the roads department noticing the new entrance and members of the public. And here's just a closer view of the cabin. And as I mentioned to you, it's an unserviced cabin, meaning it does not have a septic system. So this property is currently designated agricultural resource in the county official plan, and the proposed zoning amendment does conform to the official plan as this is permitted in the OP. And the zoning amendment application will be subject to a decision of council. A staff report, including a recommendation, will be brought to council for a decision at the January 18th council meeting. And if the amendment is approved, the property owner will be required to obtain a building permit simply because the structure is larger than 10 by 10 or 110 square feet. And all public comments must be received by Friday, January 8th at 4 p.m. in order for me to be able to have the staff report completed for the January 18th agenda. So if there's any questions, please let me know.
Okay, thank you, Mrs. Saley. Is there any comments or questions from members of council? Councillor Jaworski.
Thank you, through you, Mr. Mayor. Ms. Haley, my question is when it comes to cabins, is there any category, like any existing zoning in the township where someone can have a cabin without having to ask for this kind of amendment?
No. So currently in their rural or agricultural zone, which happens to both fall in part 10.2 or 10.1 of our zoning bylaw, and it says cabins are permitted, but they're committed subject to a temporary use bylaw or a zoning amendment only. And that's to give council the opportunity to always decide, should a cabin be located there? Does it negatively impact the surrounding uses, values, and things like that? If council wanted cabins to be permitted outright, then we certainly could amend the zoning bylaw and add it as a permitted use. And then you'd want to add some maybe other things in the definition to ensure building permits are being applied for and things like that. Assessment, all of those would come into play.
And sorry, just a subsequent. And so the logic of not, like I'm trying to understand why we make it more difficult. Like, what's the logic with not wanting? I mean, because we're putting a barrier for people to do this. So I'm just trying to understand what's the logic there.
Yeah, and I'll use your words more difficult. It's because, again, the primary use of properties is to have either a dwelling or to have, in this case, farming as a primary use because of the designation and where it's located. And I realize it's a tree property, but forestry is a type of farming as well. With your cabins are considered seasonal dwellings. They don't need to be serviced. They can be built in a different way under the building code in terms of a dwelling. So then are you wanting to allow cabins to be everywhere that eventually maybe become permanent dwellings that haven't been built properly to meet building code, to be serviced with a septic system, to be insulated properly, all of those things. So it's common to only allow cabins in these types of processes to ensure that they're going to be used as a cabin.
Thank you for that information.
Okay, thank you. Any other questions or comments from members of council? Not seeing none. Is there any comments or questions from the general public? I don't believe so. Don't see anybody with their hands up or anything at this point. So if there's nothing further with that one, Mrs. Haley?
No, I'll move on to the next one then, Mr. Mayor.
Yep, thank you.
Go back to my screen. Okay, so we're going to move on to the La Ponce zoning amendment. This property is located at part of Lot 33, Concession 1, north of the Raisin River in the geographic township of Charlottenburg, now in the township of South Glengarry, County of Glengarry, and it's located on the south side of County Road 18. You can see in here, this is the village of Martintown to the left side of my screen. And then this is the subject property here in the area that is blacked out. And the applicant or property owner recently applied for a severance to dispose of the surplus dwelling to the farming operation. The severance was conditionally approved with several conditions, one being the requirement to rezone the retained land, to reduce the minimum lot area, and to prohibit residential construction. So this is a kind of a better map showing in the pink area where the house is located and was severed, and then the blue area is the area to be retained. And then you can see in here, this is the natural hazard zone from the Raisin River. So the purpose of this amendment is to rezone the subject property from agriculture and natural hazard to agriculture exception 26 and natural hazard to reduce the minimum lot area from 20 hectares to 18.69 hectares and to prohibit residential construction. The subject property is currently vacant and is currently being farmed. If this amendment is approved, no residential construction will be permitted and the land should continue to be farmed. So I'll just remind the members of the public and council, the reason why we have to go through this is because the provincial policy statement written by the province, the 2020 version, requires that anytime housing is disposed of that's surplus to the farming operation, that the retained land must no longer permit residential construction. And in our case, because of when you do a severance, your minimum lot area must be 20 hectares for a farm parcel. And in this case, this property is slightly shy of the 20 hectares, being the 18.69 hectares. The subject property is currently designated agricultural resource in the county official plan. And the proposed amendment conforms to both the official plan and the provincial policy statement, which is why we're doing the process. No written comments have been received to date from members of the public. The zoning amendment application will be subject to a decision of council. I will have formal comments from the United Counties before I write my staff report, and they were circulated on the application, but they still have lots of time to comment. They too were supportive of this type of application because they're the approval authority of the severances. And it's my intent to bring a staff report to council in the January 18th meeting, and I do need all public comments to be received by Friday, January 8th. And that's all for this application.
Okay, thank you, Mrs. Haley. I know we went through these in the past, so they're pretty self-explanatory in regards to the zoning amendment, but if there's any questions or comments from members of council? Not seeing none. Is there any from the public? I don't see any hands up on that one either, so thank you, Mrs. Haley, on that one. We can move to the Kaneb one.
Okay. So this is our last public meeting from this evening. This application has been filed by Grant Mario Construction Limited on behalf of the property owner. This property is located in part of Lot 12, registered plan number 101, which essentially means Glen Walter, and parts of Lot 52, 77, 78, and 79 of registered plan number 142, which is also part of Glen Walter, in the geographic township of Charlottenburg, now in South Glengarry. Sorry. This is the area of the property. I'm going to help orient everyone. This street along here is our new street called Glen Walter Park Road. The Glen Walter Fire Station is located in this location, and many people would be very familiar with the gas station in this location, formerly Oklo, Stinson, and now I heard it's Esso. So this property is located just to the west of the Esso gas station. And the purpose of this amendment is to rezone the subject property from general commercial and residential 1 to residential 3 to permit the development of a 3-unit townhouse. So the area that's subject to the zoning amendment is currently 3 properties that are proposed to merge into 1 parcel of property. And I'll show a map in a minute just to explain that better. The combined total area of all 3 properties is approximately 0.57 acres in size. The proposed development will be serviced by municipal water and wastewater. This is considered to be infill development. And the access to the proposed development will be off of Glen Walter Park Road. This is a site plan that was provided to us from the applicant. This is essentially the shape of the lot. Over here would be Glen Walter Park Road. They would come in off the back to drive into the 3 units from the back. The 3 units will front on County Road 2, face County Road 2, but will not have direct access. And then this is a proposed 3D rendering of what the 3 units are going to look like. So you can see the entrances in each, and so they're a little bit different, but this is an example of what the proposed dwellings will look like when completed. So the property is currently designated residential district in the county official plan and is located in the urban settlement area of Glen Walter. And the proposed zoning amendment conforms to the official plan as well as the provincial policy statement. The United Counties of SD&G have been circulated on the application. They did provide comments. They want to ensure that they would, or they indicated that they would prefer to have the accesses off of Glen Walter Park Road. And the applicant has told us that will happen if the application is approved. And they also want to be circulated on the site plan control process to be involved in the stormwater management, proposed grading and drainage, just to ensure that there's no negative impact to County Road 2. The zoning amendment will be subject to a decision of council and a staff report, including a recommendation, I hope to bring to council on January 18th also. And if the amendment is approved, the proposed development will be subject to site plan control approval process and will require a building permit. And I do ask that all members of the public provide their comments by January 8th, 2021. So thank you. That's our last public meeting. So I'll be happy to answer any questions.
Thank you, Mrs. Haley. I don't have an issue with the amendment or zone amendment at all. I think it's makes sense for the entranceways coming off of the Motor Park. So especially with the curve and everything there and the traffic coming out of the Esso gas station, it'd be just too congested there. So any other comments or questions from members of council? Not seeing none. I know Mr. Mario was on. Mr. Mario, I'm not sure if you had any comments or any further things you wanted to add.
Oh, maybe he doesn't realize he's on mute.
He can unmute himself and he should be able to speak. I gave him the option.
Okay, I know Luke, I know you came on, but I'm not sure if you had any comments, but if you do, there you go. You're off mute now. You can go ahead. Okay, I don't hear him, so I think we'll move on. And if Mr. Mario has any comments, he can relay them to Mrs. Haley, or I'm sure he'll be at our council meeting in the January meeting. Is that when it's coming to council, Mrs. Haley?
Yes, that is my intent, to bring it to January 18th meeting.
Okay, so if there's nothing else on Mr. Knebs, so I'm going to ask to adjourn the public meeting for this evening. If I can have somebody move that, please. Moved by Councillor McDonnell, second by Councillor Jaworski. All in favor? Motion's carried. Before we leave to the general public, I guess, I just want to wish you all a very Merry Christmas. Please be safe and a prosperous 2021. Thank you.